If there's one thing that I think has become increasingly obsolete, it has to be video game myths and urban legends. There are plenty of reasons as to why this is, with the advent of the internet being the prime example, as it essentially eliminates the mystery that schoolyard talk and gaming magazines used to provide. Thanks, Electronic Gaming Monthly. Yes, I'm of course talking about video game myths and urban legends, mysteries that continue to captivate the minds of avid and casual gamers alike. Imagine, if you will, you're on the playground and you're talking to your best friend, we'll say his name is Kevin, about a new video game that you've recently bought. The video game in question? Let's say Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. You're talking to him about all the varied and detailed locations you visited, the cars you've hijacked, the citizens you've mercilessly mowed down with a Gatling gun, and, other activities that your 7-year-old eyes probably shouldn't be seeing. It's okay as long as mom doesn't come in. But then Kevin hits you with the reality check. Yeah, that's cool, but you haven't seen shit yet. I've seen Bigfoot. Bigfoot? This changes everything. As soon as you get home, you do your chores, you give your mom a hug, like every good child should, and get all that other trivial bullshit out of the way. It's game time. You're now spending hours searching every corner, every crevice, every forest, and every ominous abandoned wooden shack to find the mythical Bigfoot. Only there's one problem. He doesn't actually exist. Kevin is a big fat fucking phony, and you've fallen for the oldest trick in the book yet. Only there's one thing you might not have noticed. Everyone else fell for the exact same trick. And this right here is just one of many examples of how video game myths can spread like the bubonic plague. All it takes is one bold claim, one fabled encounter, or one very convincing screenshot, and people are going to take the bait. It is as simple as that. But video game myths and urban legends are such an integral part to not only gaming culture, but to the gaming community as well. But like I mentioned earlier, it's becoming more irrelevant as the days go by. Information regarding any video game in question can be easily found online with maybe a simple search and a couple of clicks. Data mining has been more prominent than ever before, and aside from a handful of leaks, people generally aren't going to be believing a haphazardly produced screenshot. But it's still something to look back on, and today I wanted to take a look at some of my favorite examples of video game myths and urban legends. (1996's) Super Mario 64 is considered one of the greatest and most influential video games of all time, setting the standard for any and all 3D platformers that would be released in its wake. It also helped kickstart a period of video game history that I like to call the Great Gaming Dimensional Shift, a time in which video game companies were attempting to ditch the pixelated 2D sprites of yesteryear in favor of fully 3D modeled environments, which, needless to say, was a lot more strenuous than you might initially think. Developers essentially had to acclimate to this new state-of-the-art method of making video games or risk being left in the dust by their competitors. Needless to say, there were mixed results. For every Super Mario 64, there was a Prince of Persia 3D. For every Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, there was an Earthworm Jim 3D. And for every Rayman 2, there was a Bubsy 3D. I don't really need to say more. Now, one of the biggest selling points of the Mario franchise are its characters. Mario, Luigi, Peach, Toad, Bowser, Yoshi, Wario, Donkey Kong. I'd argue that all of these characters have helped contribute to the prolonged success of the Mario franchise. So naturally, over time, Nintendo would implement the characters in a myriad of ways, whether it be the option of choosing between multiple characters, or even standalone games. Now, with the release of Super Mario 64, it was made abundantly clear that Mario was the only playable character. Understandably so, I mean, his name is in the title. However, this wouldn't stop players from theorizing that there was in fact another character you could play as, with the character in question being none other than Mario's cowardly younger brother, Luigi. This would spawn one of the most ubiquitous rumors in the world of video games, playing as Luigi in Super Mario 64, or as it's more commonly referred to, L is Real 2401. For those who are a little confused about the latter title, allow me to briefly explain. You see, many people believed that you could unlock Luigi by following cryptic instructions that were left behind on a sign in the castle courtyard. Granted, this sign was rather blurry, but nonetheless, players could make out a faint set of words that said, L is Real 2401, with many players believing that the L stood for Luigi and the 2401 stood for the amount of coins that you had to obtain in order to unlock him. You could then bring the coins back to the courtyard and Luigi would be yours. Now, while unlocking Luigi in the game was eventually deemed a hoax, plans for him to be in the game were actually true. In the infamous July 25th, 2020 leak, a beta of the game was revealed to have contained Luigi as a playable character fully equipped with voice lines and a player model, but had to be scrapped, presumably due to time and memory-related constraints. But I'm not talking about Luigi today. In order to find the myth I'm talking about today, you gotta fast forward about 8 years.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS.
The Nintendo DS is set to be the next big handheld console, and what do you know, that ended up being the case. With over 154 million units sold, the Nintendo DS would prove to be a monumental success for Nintendo, especially after the disappointing sales of the GameCube. To put that into perspective, the GameCube only sold about 21 million units. But when a console first releases, there's usually only one question that people are going to be asking. Where are the games? And Nintendo answered that question by giving the world Super Mario 64 DS. Which is funny because Super Mario 64 was a launch title for the Nintendo 64. Now, contrary to what you might initially believe, Super Mario 64 DS was not just a simple remaster or port of the original game. Instead, it was a from-the-ground-up remake featuring not just the more modernized designs of the characters, but also new content. This ranged from new levels to minigames that utilized the DS's touchscreen, multiplayer, and, most importantly in the context of this video, new characters. Alongside Mario, you were also able to play as Yoshi, Luigi, and Wario, each of which having their own sets of abilities, animations, and even character properties to a degree. Now, switching between the characters is fairly simple. You start the game out as Yoshi, and along the way, you end up unlocking each of the characters after completing certain levels. After doing so, you're able to switch between the characters by walking through these color and logo-coded doors. But if you notice, there's a fourth door on the far right side of the room, and interacting with it shows a text box that claims that you can't really hear anything. So what does this mean? Well, it's not Yoshi's door. Switching back to him is as simple as walking into the door that matches the character you're playing as. And I mean, there's not really a Mario character that wears just plain white, right? I fucking knew it. So in the early days of Mario 64 DS's release, many players believed that there was a secret character you could play as. And the character in question? Well, none other than Waluigi, the character that, sadly, always tends to get the short end of the stick, so to speak. Some things never change. So being a playable character in Mario 64 DS could have been his first big break. This, sadly, wasn't the case, as opening the mysterious white door reveals a Power Star? I mean, that's cool. Where's Waluigi? Why Waluigi, though? I'm not really sure. I mean, there were plenty of other more reasonable candidates to choose from. Donkey Kong, Daisy, hell, even Toad had more realistic chances of getting in. The first main piece of evidence was a very professional-looking document titled Purple Prizes, which, in a rather cryptic manner, detailed the copious amounts of steps needed to unlock Waluigi. This was accompanied by screenshots of him in-game and included numerous text descriptions that detailed his abilities that he could use, such as a speed boost and a spring-loaded jump. Alas, however, this was nothing more than an admittedly elaborate and well-put-together hoax, uploaded on 4chan by a user named King Bowser Koopa, who would later admit that it was indeed an April Fool's joke. It was such a convincing hoax that there were some sources that claimed it was displayed on the likes of IGN and Nintendo Power, though sadly I can't confirm if this is true or not. I couldn't really find any screenshots that could solidify these claims. The second piece of evidence that people fixated on was a screenshot of a purple rabbit found in the game's manual. You know, back when there was a lot of style and character in video game manuals. Anyway, the purple rabbit is important in this context because despite being shown in the game's manual, it cannot be found in the actual game itself. Some people believe that it was intentionally well hidden so that it would be extremely difficult for players to find it. The reason? Well, allegedly, by capturing the coveted purple rabbit, you can then gain access to Waluigi as a playable character. But, of course, this simply was not the case, as the purple rabbit was nowhere to be found, and by extension, neither was Waluigi. To this day, it's unknown whether or not Waluigi was even considered as a playable character in the game, but I wanted to pick this rumor in particular due to the fact that Nintendo had seemingly addressed some of the biggest myths in the original and brought them to fruition in the remake, only for people to ask the million-dollar question. Where's Waluigi? Probably getting shafted in Smash Brothers again. So, I want to start off this entry by talking about one of my favorite video games of all time, and that game is Sleeping Dogs. It is by far one of the most underrated open-world video games of all time, which, when you think about it, is truly saying something. Sleeping Dogs puts you in the shoes of Wei Shen, an undercover cop set to infiltrate one of Hong Kong's major triads, the Sun On Yee. Along the way, however, Wei begins to develop an immense bond with the Sun On Yee, so much so that he now has to balance the line between being an undercover cop and an esteemed member of the triad. It is a downright fantastic game with a surprisingly in-depth and well-made story, likable characters, and, oh yeah, of course, the action. See, the gameplay is where Sleeping Dogs really shines, successfully blending the hand-to-hand combat of a Bruce Lee film and the shootouts and action-packed set pieces of a John Woo movie. It's fucking incredible. Now, one of the most acclaimed aspects of Sleeping Dogs is the open world that the game takes place in, a virtual adaptation of the real-life city of Hong Kong. It was a breath of fresh air at the time, given that most open-world games took place in some sort of American city, whether it was fictionalized or based on a real location. The Hong Kong scene in Sleeping Dogs is a living, breathing world with so much personality and style. From the neon-soaked streets, to the karaoke bars and nightclubs, to the makeshift fighting arenas, and even food cart vendors lining the tightly packed marketplaces. But only get the pork buns because, as we all know, man who never eats pork bun is never a real man. Shit brings a tear to my eye. Much like any other open-world game, Sleeping Dogs is packed with Easter eggs and references. And while they're not nearly as elaborate or as detailed as, I don't know, say Grand Theft Auto's Easter eggs, they're still pretty clever. The secrets are mainly in the form of copious unlockable outfits and costumes, many of which are clear-cut references to many crime and kung fu films, which is pretty fitting given what Sleeping Dogs is all about, with references ranging from Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx, to Bruce Lee's Game of Death, to even a suit that pays homage to Quentin Tarantino's directorial debut, Reservoir Dogs. But for some, there may have been a far more grandiose secret hiding within Sleeping Dogs, one that, depending on the film, can stand anywhere from over 100 to 400 feet tall, and his name is Godzilla. Godzilla is quite possibly one of the most iconic and instantly recognizable movie monsters to ever grace the big screen. And that's not even mentioning his surprisingly prolific catalog of films, like, holy shit. He is to Japan what King Kong is to the United States, minus the frivolous lawsuit towards Nintendo. He's been stomping on Tokyo since 1954 and seems to have no sign of slowing down anytime soon. So needless to say, Godzilla really needs no introduction, despite the fact that I just introduced him. On August 17th, 2012, just 3 days after Sleeping Dogs hit store shelves, a video was uploaded on YouTube titled Sleeping Dogs Godzilla Roar Easter Egg. According to the video, it's possible to hear the iconic roar of one of Hollywood's most endearing movie monsters, and the steps in doing so are relatively simple. Head over to the Kennedy Docks, located in the northwestern portion of the map, and you'll eventually find this peculiar pool of splashing water crashing along the docks. It almost looks like there's something under there that's deliberately causing this splash effect. And according to the video, getting up close and personal is the exact thing that we should do in order to trigger the Easter egg. Sit in the water for a moment, and you'll eventually hear Godzilla's thunderous roar echoing into the city of Hong Kong. But wait a second, hold on. let's bring it back a little bit. Yeah, that's right, Godzilla takes place in Tokyo, Japan. For those who are not geographically savvy, and trust me, neither am I, it's important to note that Hong Kong and Tokyo have quite a bit of distance between each other, with Hong Kong being located on the south coast of China, and Tokyo being located in central Japan. So, already we're not at the best start. But all it takes is one look at the uploader's username, and this myth can essentially be laid to rest. Yeah, a Godzilla Easter egg, uploaded by someone with Godzilla in their username, with comments disabled, and infamous? What? So yeah, needless to say, this was an obvious hoax. I even tested this out myself using multiple factors such as time of day, the angle, the amount of time I was spending in the water, pretty much anything else you can think of. It's not real. Simple as that. Although some have heard questionable noises permeating throughout this particular area, most have chalked it up to the sounds generated from the pier itself, mainly echoes. So no, Godzilla is not real, but that didn't push Sleeping Dogs away from delving into the more mythical and paranormal waters with its first of two story-based DLCs, Nightmare in North Point. And while we sadly haven't received a sequel to this hidden gem of a video game, there are plenty of things keeping it alive and well to this day. Everything from its devoted fanbase to a remaster on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, to a resurgence of YouTube videos singing the game's praises, and of course, a preposterous gaming myth. If there's any franchise that's had the most important impact on the history of video games, I would argue that The Legend of Zelda is one of the top contenders. It essentially laid the framework for just about every adventure game released afterwards and placed emphasis on a level of freedom and exploration that simply had never been seen before. If there's something unique about the Legend of Zelda series, it's the way that sequels are handled. A grand majority of the mainline entries in the series usually take place in a unique adaptation of the Zelda universe, with some exceptions. Everything from the original pixelated glory of the first handful of Zelda games, to the first couple of forays into the 3D landscape with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, to the cel-shaded design of Wind Waker. Now, the cel-shaded design of Wind Waker is important for Zelda's history because, believe it or not, it was actually one of the biggest criticisms from fans at the time. The more cartoonish art style that was present in Wind Waker was easily the most unique art style that the series had seen up to this point, and for some fans it was a little bit too drastic. This didn't stop Wind Waker from selling well and getting near-perfect scores across the board from critics, but the roughly 4 million copies sold was a bit of a disappointment compared to Ocarina of Time's 7 million copies. And so Nintendo responded by listening to what the fans wanted. And what did they want? Well, they wanted a more mature and dark approach to the Legend of Zelda series. So after a bit of time, and assumingly amassing a collection of Tim Burton films, Twilight Princess was released, and to say that it was a success would be a huge understatement. It received damn near universal acclaim from critics and fans alike, with some even calling it the best game in the series. Although I would argue that you could pick any of the mainline entries for that spot. Twilight Princess is my personal favorite of the bunch. It has such a unique, dark, and gothic art style, some of my favorite character designs, fantastic combat, some of the best dungeons in the series, and not to mention the best companion that Link has ever had, Midna. Eat your fucking heart out, Navi. Now, when thinking of Zelda rumors and myths, you would think that Twilight Princess would have some of the darkest ones in the entire series. But surprisingly, a lot of the myths in Twilight Princess are relatively innocuous. That being said, the myths themselves are pretty captivating, with a prime example being that of Fado's house. Now, Fado is a relatively obscure character in Twilight Princess who serves as the guy who runs Ordon Ranch. And does a pretty shit job at it, if you ask me. He teaches Link how to ride Epona, he gives you a heart after completing a herding challenge, and that's about it. Hell, go to his character bio on the Zelda Fan Wiki and you can find just about as much information as you can find grammatically correct sentences in a Stephanie Meyer's novel. So why am I talking about Fado? Because I'm not talking about Fado, I'm talking about his house. Ooh. You see, Twilight Princess has a surprisingly vast number of buildings that you can enter. This can range from small houses, to humble shops, to the iconic Hyrule Castle, and many other locations. There is, however, one house that no matter what you do, you cannot enter under normal parameters. Take a wild guess as to who I'm referring to. That's right, Charlo, because he's fucking homeless. No. I'm of course talking about Fado. Throughout the course of the game, there are a plethora of buildings that you normally can't access until you've completed a certain number of tasks, such as completing the main story to a certain degree or finishing up a side quest or two. Regardless, almost every building that you come across in Twilight Princess is accessible in some way, whether in human or wolf form. Fado's house is the rare exception. From the very beginning of the game to the end credits to even 100% completion, Fado's house remains permanently locked with no way of going inside under legitimate conditions. Now, why would you want to go inside? Well, some players theorize that if you were able to unlock the door using a secret method, there would be a rare coveted item inside. The item in question? Nobody knows. Intricacies aren't really necessary in certain corners of the gaming landscape. Regardless though, people wanted to find a way in, and they were going to do whatever was necessary. And of course, someone eventually did. By using an action replay cheating device and enabling the code Super Claw Shot, which essentially gives you unlimited range and the ability to latch onto anything, you can clip through Fado's house and walk through it to uncover... nothing. There's nothing. Huh. It was later revealed in an interview with the game director that the reason behind Fado's house being infinitely locked was very simple. They ran out of time, and they simply couldn't create the interior of the house in a timely manner. So, to prevent players from entering an unfinished room, they simply locked it. Not the most exciting thing I know. What's even more baffling to me is the fact that an HD remaster of Twilight Princess was released on the Wii U in 2016, and was a bit more than just an upscaled port of the GameCube version. It featured a slew of new content ranging from small things like the Ghost Lantern, which lets you detect nearby pose, to brand new areas such as the Cave of Shadows, unlockable by using a Wolf-Link amiibo. Yet, despite all of these changes, Fado's house remained permanently locked up. To this day, no one truly knows what the internal structure of Fado's house was supposed to look like. That is, except for at least two people, Alnuma and Fado himself. As somewhat of an open-world video game connoisseur, I feel more than comfortable saying that the one company that has truly mastered the craft of creating an open-world sandbox is Rockstar Games. As the creators of the Grand Theft Auto series, these guys are no strangers to the realm of video games that feature robust, dynamic, and truly immersive open worlds. I'd say that without Rockstar, and by extension the Grand Theft Auto series, open world games wouldn't be nearly as prominent as they are today. So yeah, the influence of this company and their golden child of a gaming franchise are second to none. But I'm not talking about Grand Theft Auto today. No, instead I'm talking about a franchise that, despite having only 3 games, is quite possibly my favorite Rockstar franchise to date. And that is the Red Dead series. What started out as a high-octane, over-the-top, and highly stylized western in the form of Red Dead Revolver eventually evolved into a franchise that placed emphasis on the grim, harsh realities of living life in the Wild West, as opposed to the more glorified adaptations seen in Hollywood films. Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 were the games Revolver had evolved into, and the results were fantastic. Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 are not only considered some of the greatest open-world video games of all time, but some of the greatest video games of all time, period. The more gritty and serious tone permeating throughout the story was in stark contrast to Grand Theft Auto's relatively serious but also humorous and farcical tone.
This is Brucey. I'm pushing it to the max, rolling deep, baby. Leave me a message.
And this is what made people really fall in love with this series. And yeah, I fucking adore these games. If you have even a slight interest in video games and you love a good western, I mean, these 2 games are the cream of the crop. Now, despite fixating on the more realistic interpretations of living life in the Wild West, these games don't shy away from the more mythical and paranormal aspects seen in video games. Red Dead Redemption, for example, features the mythical jackalope, a hybrid between a jackrabbit and an antelope, if you have the Hunting and Trading Outfits DLC pack. Red Dead Redemption 2 features a copious amount of Easter eggs referencing the unexplained and downright bizarre, such as a ghost train, a UFO, even a vampire. And hell, Red Dead Redemption's standalone story DLC, Undead Nightmare, is a zombified, horror-esque adventure filled to the brim with all things mystical and unorthodox. You've got the 4 horses of the apocalypse, zombies, obviously, the Chupacabra, and even Bigfoot, which I'll say ends in a surprisingly somber manner. In other words, you fucked up. But I think the most unsettling thing that you can find in either one of these games is perhaps the most subtle. In Red Dead Redemption, you can pick up newspapers with headlines that range from humorous stories to reports that coincide with the events of the main campaign, to everything in between. Among these newspapers is one that details some of the mysterious sightings found in an abandoned town by the name of Tumbleweed, with the article title reading, "Tumbleweed Haunted?" In it, the article briefly details that some have reported paranormal sightings ranging from the spirits of the dead to ghosts to even something more mythical like ghouls and fairies. Look, I have an aunt that believes in fairies. We don't judge here. Following this, however, the article concludes by stating that their reporter on the scene found nothing out of the ordinary, but if anyone has seen something unusual, then report it to the newspaper. Obviously, this was Rockstar essentially baiting the players of the game into exploring the area in hopes of finding something peculiar, and explore the area they did. Needless to say, there were a myriad of eerie discoveries found, the most prominent of which being 2 particular instances that have been confirmed as true. The first discovery was in the church. Inside, you can find an assortment of pews with a pulpit at the front engraved with the words, "The devil has got into that beast." Now, what that beast is, no one really knows, but most people chalk it up to the second confirmed discovery, a mysterious barking noise that you can hear at night, despite a dog not visibly being seen in the area. It's a downright eerie and unsettling part of the game, possibly the creepiest in the entire game, but the real mystery comes with what many see as the symbol of the abandoned town, Tumbleweed Mansion. After clearing it of bandits, Tumbleweed Mansion begins to become unsettling. So much so that players have reported numerous bizarre occurrences that have happened, mostly of the supernatural kind. Some have reported ghostly footsteps being visibly noticeable on the staircase, while others have simply only heard the footsteps, only for no one to be nearby. The most well-known theory, however, involves a ghost lady who is said to sit in a chair in the house at around 4 a.m. In the game, of course, not real life. This isn't fucking Animal Crossing. But some people went a step further and claimed that there was an elaborate set of steps you needed to accomplish in order to actually see the ghosts. It theorized that shooting the skulls off of the mantle of the mansion's entrance, followed by shooting out every light inside of the mansion, can trigger the ghost in the chair, which has been tested numerous times, but to no avail. There's one picture that shows evidence of a ghost lady, but many have claimed it's simply a fake photo due to the fact that it's the only recorded instance of the ghost being in the game. Tumbleweed returned in Red Dead Redemption 2, but is a little bit different this time around. See, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel to the first game, and during the events of the game, Tumbleweed is a town that is essentially deteriorating due to a myriad of reasons. The sheriff is unjust, cruel, and downright corrupt in some aspects. The town is constantly being raided by the Del Lobo gang, and due to both of these events, the economic decline of the town is at a staggering degree. That being said, though, the game does pay tribute to its more unsettling appearance in the first game, with bats swarming out of the roof of the mansion on some occasions. And while you can't enter the mansion, it still has this unsettling aura around it that I just can't really describe in a traditional sense. So it makes you wonder, did Rockstar make it so strenuous and difficult to find the ghost in the mansion that there's only one recorded instance? Or is all of this simply nothing more than a myth? It's kinda hard to say, but I can at least say this. Regardless of whether or not Tumbleweed really is haunted by spirits, its creepy ambience and noticeably vapid signs of life truly make it a ghost town in more ways than one. And for the last entry of this video, we're looking at a relatively obscure myth that comes from one of my favorite action RPGs of all time, Kingdom Hearts 2. See, when I was younger, I never really played games that were exclusive to a console. I just mainly played a lot of licensed games. The one major exception is Kingdom Hearts. Well, even though it's still a licensed game. Yes, nowadays the Kingdom Hearts series is on just about every console under the sun, but for a fairly prolonged period of time, it was seen as a PlayStation exclusive franchise, at least when it came to the mainline entries. Regardless, it's a masterful crossover that works way better than it has any right to. Take Final Fantasy, the most iconic RPG franchise in gaming, and Disney, the most iconic animation studio in cinema, and throw them together in a collaboration that just works.
I'm not kidding.
Now, in terms of RPG elements, Kingdom Hearts follows suit with many other well-established RPG franchises. Leveling up, gaining new abilities, managing a party of characters, learning spells, you get the idea. However, the aspect that we're fixating the most on in this video is the summoning system. In the Kingdom Hearts series, you can unlock charms that allow you to summon a plethora of Disney characters from all corners of the animation studio's history. But unlike some RPGs where you summon the character and let them do the work, Kingdom Hearts places emphasis on the interactivity of it. Sure, they can attack on their own, but if you want the most out of your summon, all you gotta do is walk near them, press triangle, and unleash havoc. It is a fun and pretty damn engaging system. Kingdom Hearts 2 continued this trend, letting you summon the likes of Genie, Stitch, Peter Pan, and even Chicken Little? What the fuck? But for some people, 4 summons was not enough. Many people have believed that there was a mythical 5th summon that you could unlock. The summon in question? Well, none other than the most recognizable character in Disney's arsenal, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. It's Mickey Mouse. Now, Mickey in the Kingdom Hearts series actually has a pretty serious impact on the narrative. Kingdom Hearts 2, I would argue, gives Mickey even more precedence in the story than the other entries. So I suppose it wouldn't be entirely out of the picture for him to be summonable. How do you do it, though? Well, it takes a bit of time. See, in the Kingdom Hearts series, Jiminy Cricket is a companion to Sora, Donald, and Goofy, with his main purpose being to record all of the information that the trio come across, and I suppose to provide moral support. He doesn't fight. Every time you discover something new, whether it be an enemy, a character, a world, or anything in between, Jiminy is going to mark it down in his journal for you to look at later on. Think of it as the Kingdom Hearts equivalent of a compendium. Kingdom Hearts 2 is no different, and given the huge increase in content that the game provided, especially in comparison to the first entry, it was a lot of information that you had to gather. According to players, successfully completing Jiminy's journal opened up an extra door in the world Timeless River, which is essentially a throwback to Steamboat Willie, the very first cartoon that Mickey had ever appeared in. However, accessing Timeless River is a little bit different from the standard procedure. Traditionally, you would open up the Gummy map and simply land on a world of your choosing. For Timeless River, you have to land on Disney Castle and then enter a specific room that grants you access to the world in the form of a door. Then you're in, and to get back to Disney Castle, you just go back through the door you just entered. But apparently, after completing Jiminy's journal, an extra door spontaneously appears in this area, right next to the aforementioned door that leads you back into the castle. Upon entering, you'll be tasked to fight off a horde of Heartless alongside Mickey, and after doing so, he'll be available to summon whenever you need him. Now, at face value, this seems pretty legitimate. It would be a pretty damn satisfying reward after pumping hours and hours into filling Jiminy's journal. Plus, the whole Door and Timeless River thing makes sense. It's the world that celebrates Mickey's debut cartoon. What other location could be viable? And believe it or not, the myth of summoning Mickey isn't entirely untrue. You see, in Kingdom Hearts 2, there's a mechanic aptly named Mickey Rescue. In certain boss battles, if Sora's health drops to 0, there's a chance that text will pop up, allowing the player to continue the battle as Mickey. Your main goal in this state is to not only ward off the boss and whittle its health down, but to also revive Sora so he can get back into the battle. It's a fun system that shockingly has not made a return since Kingdom Hearts 2. So maybe the chances of Mickey being a summon aren't so slim, right? No, it was a crock of shit. Players had excitedly filled up Jiminy's journal, only to be left with a rather cryptic cutscene that, while looking badass, just wasn't as satisfying as having the king himself fight alongside you whenever you want. What a shame. But hey, with Kingdom Hearts 4 being developed, there's a chance that Mickey might become a summon. We just gotta wait like 10 years? 15? Maybe? At least GTA 6 will be out by then.